Webster Griffin Tarpley is a leading political thinker in our current age, a political activist, historian living near Washington, D.C. As an activist historian, he's best known for his book, George Bush, The Unauthorized Biography. He is a 9/11 truth scholar, activist, and decades-long expert on international terrorism. My pleasure to introduce Webster Tarpley to Coast to Coast. Webster, how are you?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
My pleasure. Last week or so, Donald Rumsfeld, former Secretary of Defense, when asked by a radio host, my friend Mancow, what about Building 7? How could it go down the way it did? He said, what's Building 7? I can't believe it, Webster. I can't believe it. Oh.
Well, concerning that, I mean, the key to that whole thing are the 25-plus drills that were either going on 9/11 in advanced preparation or recently completed. And I have argued in a book, 9/11 Synthetic Terror, as well as in a couple of articles, some of them published in Europe, that if you look at the 25-plus drills, you'll see that every aspect of 9/11 is essentially covered by one of those drills. In other words, it was produced by somebody taking the drill live. It's a very interesting concept. If you remember seeing this movie with Tom Cruise about the plot to kill Hitler, Operation Valkyrie,
right?
Remember this very dramatic scene where Stauffenberg rewrites this emergency plan, Operation Valkyrie, and instead of making it a plan to keep Hitler in power, he rewrites it with small changes as a plan to get Hitler out of power, and then he takes it and he gets Hitler to sign it. Remember this interesting
I
thing?
did, yep.
This is the key to how these things are done. What they obviously did was they took a bunch of drills, they rewrote them, they redirected them, and then they took them live. They flipped them live in the usual parlance. And you can see this repeatedly. The Kennedy assassination is bootlegged through Operation Mongoose, redirected from Castro to Kennedy. You can see it with Able Archer 83 or 84, was it, when the Soviets thought that drill was about to go live, nuclear war. They also matched it then with their own red alert. So it's a well-established technique, and I'm afraid that if you don't look at it from the point of view of these drills, you miss the actual mechanism that created the events you saw.
You know, Webster, also, and this is not the expertise here we're talking about in this program with you tonight, but I do want to tap your brain. Tomorrow, Sirhan comes up for parole, the convicted assassin of Robert F. Kennedy, and there's no question in my mind he was there, that he was one of the shooters, because Rosie Greer, who tackled him, saw him with the gun there. But I'm convinced that there was another shooter there.
I believe that the statistics are that there were 10 shots fired, and the gun that Sirhan had only 8 chambers or 8 rounds or something like that.
13 shots, 8 rounds.
Yeah, something like that. So, of course, most of these things are false flag events. And if you look at this book of mine, I've got a whole theory: the moles, the patsies, the technicians, what is the division of labor, how they create this kind of optical illusion, which is the false flag terror event.
They get people like the Sirhans, and whether he was hypnotized or not, I do not know. They get the Lee Harvey Oswalds. They get them there. They might not know why they're there. In Oswald's case, I mean, he always contended he was a patsy.
Yes.
And then while they're there, the whole scheme is going on around them, and they don't even know what's happening, do they?
Yeah, it's the difference between the patsy, of course, the patsy or the Oswald is the fanatic, the dupe, the double agent, the psychotic, the hapless person who might be there confused. They are not capable of creating the effects you see. This also goes for Atta, the so-called 9/11 hijackers, and so forth. But then you've got in the background a group of moles, that is, government officials who are loyal to this sinister Wall Street-controlled network inside the federal government, which has been there for 125 years or thereabouts. And this entity, this secret government rogue network, has its own policies, and that's often war when the official government might want peace. So they conduit these things through the various government agencies. Then there's also the question of the technicians being the people who can indeed create the effects that you see. And they're the ones who actually do these things. So in the case of Sirhan, he's a patsy there. He's got the ethnic characteristics that they wanted to take the fall, to be demonized, to target some group. but then there's likely to have been some technician, that is, some super highly trained marksman or something like this in some nook of this room. Very, very hard to say.
You know, this planet, Webster, is going through all kinds of things right now. We're going through this economic mess. We're going through these bizarre uprisings in the Middle East. We're going through wars. We're going through famine. And we're going through this push for a new world order all at the same time. I don't believe in coincidences. This is planned.
Certainly not. Maybe we could start with the destabilization wave in the Middle East, because I think this is probably the most timely thing, and it's in some ways the most dangerous. Would that be all right?
Yeah, let's.
All right, then. Right now, the news, I've got Al Jazeera here in my house in Maryland, right near Washington, D.C., and they're reporting that Gaddafi has now successfully recaptured 2 cities, and he's attacking several other cities, so that it's likely that you're going to have a prolonged civil war in Libya. Now, if Gaddafi starts winning, or I might even say if he keeps winning, that may be the situation now already, we could be a week or 2 away from a new Iraq war. And this time it will be done not by the growling imperialist ogres Bush and Cheney. This will now be done under left cover for human rights by the smiling, genial, telegenic Obama, with almost no resistance from the U.S. population. But the possibilities with Gaddafi, of course, this will make 4 wars. We'll have the Iraq war still going on, in spite of what they say, the Afghan war going on. We have, like it or not, a war with Pakistan going on right now. And then you add in Libya. This could get to be a tremendous situation of overstretch. Right now, the debate is there going to be a no-fly zone, right? The same thing that the U.S. did to Iraq at the end of the first Gulf War. And you can just see in the last 24 hours, the U.S. Senate wants a no-fly zone. Hillary Clinton, always a warmonger out of her tremendous psychological weakness, she wants a no-fly zone. The British government, this is really the big one. Prime Minister Cameron is got foaming at his mouth with his demands to prepare an attack on Libya. Obviously, it's going to be led by the U.S., so he's ready to fight to the last American, as usual. And this could now go very, very quickly. And I think you have to see the context of this, why you've got this wave of destabilizations, coups, putsches, right, when a bunch of generals get together and take over the government of a country. It seems to me quite clear that this is a policy of the U.S. intelligence community, the British intelligence community, and it's also taken over then by Obama and by Cameron.
Now the leaders, though, of these Middle Eastern countries, these guys weren't Boy Scouts.
No, but this is not the cause. In other words, this doesn't really enter into it one way or another. In other words, they were supported for reasons that had nothing to do with human rights or democracy or any of this, and they're now being overthrown for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with human rights or democracy. The methods being used are those of the color revolution, the CIA people power coup, the postmodern coup, and interestingly, I had written about this. I put out a book just about 3 years ago right now, Obama the Postmodern Coup, which you can get through my website, tarpley.net, and if people are interested in seeing this sort of, as a motion picture, there are these movies that Alex Jones made interviewing me, Fall of the Republic and Obama Deception. Mm-hmm. These are at Infowars.com. The idea is that with the neocons, Bush and Cheney, their method was direct military aggression. You show a neocon a country, he'll say, bomb it, invade it. These are, one-trick ponies. Military aggression is all they know. Now you have something much more sophisticated. This is now the Zbigniew Brzezinski soft power school. We've got Samantha Power sitting in the White House, who superintends part of these things. We've got the National Endowment for Democracy. We've got the International Republican Institute, the National Democratic Institute, Freedom House. We've got a guy called Gene Sharp, who's not very well known, but should be, the Albert Einstein Foundation. And what they've developed is a kind of technology of destabilization, which involves things like having a color, having a slogan, having a telegenic orator, using an election, right? Having a poll that says you won the election and the dictator lost.
Understanding the Internet.
Right, and all of this, these are essentially the techniques that came out of the overthrow of the Shah when Brzezinski and Carter overthrew the Shah quite deliberately and quite deliberately brought in Khomeini because Brzezinski wanted Islamic fundamentalism as a bulwark against Soviet communism.
But they turned on us.
Yes, well, of course, but Brzezinski would say it was all worth it because the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan destroyed the Soviet Union, and that was really the task. So it was all more than worth it. In other words, you're ahead at the end of the game, because if the Soviets are gone, then you have world domination quite apart from anything that Iran does or does not do. Later on with Marcos in the Philippines. And then, of course, the other big one is the Velvet Revolutions, right? The fall of the communist regimes in 1989. Later on, these methods have been brought back. You could say that the Obama campaign of 2007-2008 was in many ways a color revolution brought home to the U.S., but now with what you just mentioned, with the Internet, with Google, with at least the beginnings of Facebook and Twitter and the rest of this, and that method has now been re-exported. They tried this in Iran in the summer of 2009. It did not work, but now they have brought it back with a vengeance into the Arab world, and it's working to some extent.
To some extent. I don't think they anticipated Gaddafi to fight it out as much as he has.
Right. Gaddafi is someone they've been trying to kill for years.
Right.
You may remember
Reagan almost got him.
Bombing.
Yeah.
But there's also another very interesting story, the David Shaler affair. David Shaler is a guy who was a member of MI5, the British counterintelligence, like the FBI, and he was sitting in his office in London, and he noticed that his counterpart at MI6 was attempting to assassinate Gaddafi, and how they did it was they brought in Al-Qaeda, or a group calling itself Al-Qaeda, and gave them 100,000 British pounds to put some bombs around Gaddafi, and this was done. The bombs went off. Gaddafi escaped, but a bunch of civilians were killed, and Shaler then went public with this, and he was thrown in jail. He had violated the official secret